Hello everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Catch-Up Ramblings 27. Yes, 27 Catch-Up Ramblings. Hey, we're doing alright. Doing alright indeed. Just gotta wait for it to appear. There it is. Jolly good. And then I gotta let the people know what's going down in Fleet Town, so that people don't forget that Fleet is going strong. You know, coming up with an original description for each one of these videos, I will admit, my imagination is not always up to the task. It has to be said. But I try. I try my best. There we go. And then I will do this, and then we'll do this. And as per usual, we do that, so we let people know that we're going. And we're going. Hello, Timu. Nice to see you. Right, so... Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, one and all. Well, all two of you. Although there probably will be some people on the YouTubes at some point. There always is, for the most part. So... gotta keep cracking, as they say. Right. So that's all the Q&A log. There we go. Nice and easy. How much have we got? About an hour's worth, I think. I don't think any have been missed or forgotten. Nope, doesn't look like it. Got a few good ones in here, although some of them are because of the way it's worked out. Right, you have to forgive me, I'm just gathering my thoughts. Right. He believes he's been summoned. Yes, he orders. You have perhaps been summoned. Right, so this should be nice and simple this week. So, AMC Woods M6... Oh, no, hang on, even more than that. Wow, okay. The Killer Officer asks, what if the Hawke Siddeley P1154 entered RN service in the early 1960s? Do you think the UK would have the edge in carrier aviation with aircraft than the US and Soviet Navy or later the French Navy for the next 2 decades? Not really. The impressive thing about the P1154 is that it's a supersonic VTOL aircraft. In terms of the aircraft it's competing with, honestly, it's not a bad aircraft by any means, but it's not... Yeah, basically there's no... But obviously, of course, you know, it would be give the Air Force a lot more, the RAF and the RN a lot more punch when through deck aircraft come in. But it's not a Corsair, it's not an F4. It's a good aircraft for what it is, but it ain't a world beater compared to... No, this is the aircraft that was going to come after the Harrier. A supersonic Harrier. Probably would have been called Super Harrier had it entered service. Of course, it didn't enter service, so there you are. Although had it entered service in the 60s, it would have likely sped up the decline of the RN's Cadabar carrier fleet. Because if your primary strike and air defense asset doesn't need an angled flight deck or a catapult to launch, then at that point, why are we operating big angled flight deck carriers? Will be the argument made. 1931 asks, am I correct to think the Type 31 frigate will be sticking around even after the Type 32s enter service? Yes, absolutely. I mean, to be frank, 31 is needed for mass, although, to be fair, we probably could have got better value for money with OPVs for the job that 31 is supposed to do. Or is it 26 I'm thinking of? Yes, no, I'm thinking of 31. Yeah, 31 is, politely, I mean, I've discussed this with Cyclic and others, 31, it's bringing mass back into the RN, but politely, Type 31 is... it's barely capable of defending itself against a very basic missile threat. Barely. Honestly, we would have been better off with some big OPVs rather than 31 and build more 32s. 32, which we don't know what it's going to be yet. 32 would better be an actual proper large multi-purpose frigate. Because as it stands right now, it needs to be. Because 26 is barely capable of being an ASW asset. It doesn't even have... it's an ASW asset that doesn't have shipboard torpedo tubes for snapshots if it gets jumped. Which you would expect an ASW ship to have. So, yeah. Type 26 is just about acceptable for ASW work, but not solo. It can work as part of a task group, but it's lacking that crucial close-in, oh god, there's a submarine right there, shoot it, shoot it, shoot it, shoot it, that you kind of need in an ASW asset. The problem with 31 is, honestly, it's too much ship. It's a frigate for doing the work of a large OPV. And honestly, the money could have gone into buying something else. Or keeping Albion and Bulwark going. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, the 31s will absolutely have to stick around after 32s enter service, because politely, the 31s will be needed for just to put mass into the RN. Even if it's not really useful mass. YouTube Minecraft Watcher, what if in 1916, Britain's colonies, India, Egypt, and South Africa went into full revolution to break free? That... well, India has revolts all the time. In this period.
I can answer India.
Go on.
And the answer is... the British take back over pretty quickly. You forget the British Raj of 1916. It's not the British Raj of 1945. The British Raj of 1916 is 27 different princedoms in a trench coat. that
Yeah.
still actively fight amongst each other. A chunk of them going to revolt, as long as it's not hyper bad. And given the British Indian Army,
And also, even
the
if
revolt gets crushed.
yeah, and even if a large portion of them revolt, all it takes is 1 or 2 remaining loyal to give the British an in to put the rest of them down.
No, right. Are you familiar with Hyperbad,
Yes, I am.
the Prince of Hyperbad? You're aware that through being an absolute masterclass in politician and diplomat, he, unlike all the other princes, kept the right to have his own completely independent own army,
Yes.
including 6 divisions.
Yes, it's almost like it's an independent state within India, almost basically.
Yeah. To the point it tries to become independent and gets invaded in India in 1947.
Yeah, which I do think was a little bit, sketch. We want to be independent, so do I. No. Independent on our terms. No, but I want to be... No.
Well, it's questionable because India would have lost at least southern India if Hyderabad were independent.
Well,
and that
tough
could
shit.
have caused the collapse of India.
Oh, well.
India.
Maybe that would have been better. Let's be honest. Maybe that would have been better.
Sketch aside. As long as, and for those who don't know, the Prince of Hyderabad was very much a British loyalist.
Because he knew full well that the Hyderabad royal family knew full well that if India ever gained independence, it would try to do so as a unitary state, and whatever independence and self-rule they have will be crushed by a government in Delhi.
No, you're thinking of them in the 30s. This is 1916.
Even then.
But in 1916, the current guy is a reformist who doesn't like the way Indian society is structured and wants to Christianize and Westernize it. Which is why Hyderabad is so fundamental in British control over India, like Bengal. But as for the rest of the princes, or a popular revolt, India has the issue of it's really hard for them to get a popular revolt going because of the caste system, which creates internal infighting.
And of course, food insecurity as well across a nation that vast. And it's been set up that way.
That's more likely to cause a revolution than it is to stop one.
Yeah.
And it's also, if it comes from the princes, especially and if it comes from the old Mughal princes that technically control Delhi, the Sultanate of Delhi, it's pretty fangless because it wouldn't have popular support.
Yeah, and also Britain's mobilized to fight a major war. If there was ever a bad time to rebel, this is it.
I suppose the better times, the best time would be 1918, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, but so let's
16.
Yeah, I think we've dealt with India.
So 16 is by the time that the empire is embroiled in the Civil War, in the European War. But they've also formed the British Army of India that's recruiting out of very loyalist areas like Bangladesh, like Hyderabad, like Tamil, and like Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
And the British actually have a very large and organized army in India.
Yeah.
So it would just be a distraction.
And also politely, Indians will fight to keep British rule. They have done on numerous occasions.
Well, it's less they would fight to keep British rule more than the Indian identity is not a thing.
No, what I mean is, there's a lot of people go, oh, well, they wouldn't fire on their countrymen. Yes, they absolutely would.
Yeah, the British Indian Army, the British ensure that they would fire on the Indian Army by taking people from Bengal and having them garrison Madras, who they don't even have a language in common with.
Yeah.
And taking people from Madras to garrison Bombay, and people from Bombay to garrison Delhi.
The British aren't
stupid. Which is the equivalent of for context, is the equivalent of recruiting Frenchmen to occupy Belarus and recruiting Belarusians to occupy Greece and
Yeah,
using Greeks to occupy Northern Ireland.
yeah, yeah.
South Africa's the interesting one.
Yeah, that would just be another Boer revolt. That would be another Boer revolt. That's what that would
That's
be.
a Boer War.
Yeah, that's another Boer
But
war.
this is interesting because it's a Boer War after the formation of the Rhodesia colony.
Which the ghost of Cecil Rhodes is just frothing at the mouth at this point. The man will claw his way out of the grave to kill Boers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he will just be incensed with rage, even if he's dead.
And you would probably see a much earlier incorporation and dominionization of Rhodesia and Iceland.
Also, what I would say is you might also got a lot of the Afrikaner movement that causes the problems for South Africa later in its history. You know, all the racism, because it was mostly the Afrikaners that, not the British.
No, the British settlers didn't help. I'll be real, the Cape Colony did not help.
Yeah, but
it's
and
interesting.
then Egypt is the most laughable. The Egyptian monarchy, I'm going to become independent and do my own things. Oh yeah, you're going to do that while we're fighting to protect your nominal independence you have under us. You know, where the Ottomans are trying to retake you in the middle of a fucking war. Please do so. We have an army right there. We'll crush you in 2 seconds flat.
The Sultan of Egypt has 1,000 royal guards. The British Army has 11,000 with artillery support and cavalry support stationed just outside the palace.
Yeah, it's...
The British were keeping Bro on house arrest and having their Governor General run the country.
Yeah, and also, let's not forget the fact that, you know, the Ottomans are fighting the British at this point. And as far as the Ottomans are concerned, and I know, we all know it's not going to happen, but of course, with hindsight, they know that if the Ottomans win, any form of Egyptian independence is just dead. The Ottomans have not forgotten what the Egyptians did to them. They will be reintegrating Egypt as a proper province rather than a semi-independent.
Well, they'll try. Yeah. They will try.
Which basically means that, so your options are keep your nice palace and your royal guard and your nominal independence under British rule, or lose it all when the Ottomans get there. And which do you think is the option they take?
And you don't so much have to worry about a popular revolt, because British rule has seen a lot more economic liberalisation of the country since they de facto took over.
Yeah.
And standards of living have increased significantly.
Yeah, because remember, the revolution that, like, bear in mind, when Egypt gets independence, the king runs it so badly, it takes, 2 to 3 years for the revolution that brings Nasser to power to happen, because of how badly Farouk runs the country. Yeah.
And so the way the British have solidified its control is by going, we're the ones running our institutions, we're the ones that are keeping this country running.
Yeah, which is why this whole forced decol... It's like Dr. Clark says. The whole... We want you to decolonize. Yeah. The like, guys, we haven't set up the systems of governance to avoid military rule because the military is the part we've trained to run things. If we decolonize... No, Britain, you must decolonize. We're the US, we say so. Colony empire, bad. Yes, but can we slow it? No, do it now. Like, I'm not saying decolonization shouldn't have happened as quickly as possible. The sooner that spectre can be put behind various Western nations, the better. But I do think it was a little bit mismanaged.
It was mismanaged and largely done from the control of Washington and Moscow.
Yeah.
Moscow had no intention of properly decolonizing.
After all, they were a colonial power themselves. Looks at the Baltic states, parts of Finland, and the massive
Siberia.
Yeah, and the
Siberia.
Yeah.
And Washington, who had very, very little institutional understanding on how colonies worked.
Because they did settler colonialism, which basically meant they didn't have colonies, they just took land and put people on it, and then they were no longer colonies. I mean, look at how badly the Americans butchered their withdrawal from the Philippines and the setting up of a government there.
Well, that's because the Philippines were a shit show.
But yes.
Even before the Americans pulled out. But you end up running into this massive issue of, as you could see from places like Kenya and Tanzania, and to a lesser degree Rhodesia, if you gave the colonial powers time, they could set up functional democratic governments.
Yes.
But as you're probably aware, Rhodesia had its whole issue.
Yeah. But I will point out, while Rhodesia is not such a good example, the states of East Africa above Rhodesia,
aside from Uganda.
Yeah, aside from Uganda. They mostly they're examples of what happens if Britain is allowed to take its time. Because despite the situation, I mean, look at what they're playing now. They're looking at themselves and going, we can form a transnational union of democratic states to try and uplift ourselves by, pooling resources. Which is something they wouldn't be able to do if they were all nationalist hellholes with military governments and coups every 5 seconds.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, during decolonization, the British and to a lesser degree the Americans made a massive push for roads and railroads.
Yeah.
And what they did was that they connected Nairobi and Tanayaki, one of the big cities in central Tanzania.
Oh yeah, well that was
connected them through railroads.
That was just finally finishing the East African Railway. That's what that was.
And they effectively made it into a network, not a single railway.
Well, the thing with the East African Railway is that it was built under British rule, as for the East African colonies, and various different colonies inherited different parts of it. But they continue to run it as a multinational system even after decolonization.
Yeah.
But very quickly, just to answer something Knight has said. Yeah, the British decolonization was supposed to be a 100-year plan. Well, no, the 100-year plan was the transition from empire to Commonwealth, not decolonization. Yes, there would have been free and independent states, but it's not the same thing as decolonization because they would have firmly been they are not allowed to leave.
No, you're getting plans mixed up. The 100 years to decolonize, it's not 100 years to decolonize, it's 100 years to dominion. And it's the political and institutional theory that any developed colony will take about 100 years to transition from colony to full white dominion status. So essentially go from stuff like the Niger colony in Nigeria to the Dominion of Nigeria, which was planned, which would have had the same rights as the Dominion of Canada. Which is why if you look at British colonial policy, the term white and black dominions are very important. Because they reference, because Egypt is technically a black dominion. Yes, it is a race thing. I'm not going to deny that. It's a skin color thing. But
turns out
as an institution,
turns out it was a different time back then, eh?
Yes, but it also applies to the Black Dominion.
The thing is, it's important that we recognise this and not try and sugarcoat it. Just say it like it is. It's important for the historical record. Like we don't have to hold people accountable for stuff their ancestors did. That's just stop. But it's important we recognise what happened.
Yeah, but it's one of those things of I've noticed that a lot. Do I sound fucked up?
No. Not at all.
Because I'm not the lead singer for Disturbed. Hello, silence, my old friend.
Anyway,
Um,
shall we get back to the whole?
but it's important because it's bad, but yeah, like you can't understand the empire without understanding racism in the empire,
Mm-hmm.
and even stuff like administrative terms like white and black dominions.
Yeah.
Because interestingly, when South Africa's referred to as a black dominion, it's based off racial stereotypes about the lack of development and education and capability of the population. Which is why when you see a lot of the plans, it talks about forcefully transitioning these areas from black to white dominions, which are basically
Yeah.
forcefully uplifting cultures they see as inferior to anglicized versions of governance. Like it's objectively, it's not a bad idea, but it's a very racist idea.
Yes, it is. Right,
And it
so
assumes racial superiority.
yes. So, next question. Akizuki, has Fleet seen 28 Years Later? No, I haven't, and I basically have no interest in seeing 28 Years Later.
Is that the zombie one?
It's the film like that's going back after 28, because like you had 28 days and you had 28 weeks, and now it's 28 years. Like it's all like the British Isles gets overrun by a zombie outbreak, like a virus outbreak,
Yeah.
and then the U.S. Army comes in to help rebuild things, and that gets fucked. Which is, well, that's the most horrifying thing about that, not the destruction of the people. It's the fact that the U.S. is setting up an administration in Britain, and then fails to do anything, and the fact that Britain is gone. That's the most horrifying thing to me, in that.
Yeah, because it goes global after 28 days.
Yeah.
Um,
Steve Clark. Fleet, you have modern charts and accurate timepieces, but you are transported to 1492 and are to sail with Columbus as his navigator. Where are you going to go? Well, wherever Columbus wants me to go, because I don't have a choice. I have to take Columbus where Columbus wants to go. He's the captain, I'm the navigator. That's... Like, if he wants to go west and find a route to India, well, guess where we're going? We're going west to find a route to India. And if we happen to run into some islands, then we happen to run into some islands. Typical officer. Opinions on the OV-1 Mohawk. Why did the US Army operate fixed-wing combat aircraft with the Mohawk, and do you think it's a stopgap solution until the true helicopter gunship entered service in numbers? Well, first of all, the OV-1 Mohawk was part of a tranche of aircraft that the US built. Like, the US Army has had aircraft for a while. They are very much exclusively employed in extreme close support and observation roles. So, for example, if you want an aircraft spot for artillery, it'll be an Army aircraft doing that, rather than a Air Force aircraft. If you're doing close battlefield reconnaissance, it'll be an Army aircraft doing that. They weren't stop gaps before gunships came in, and logistical helicopters came in. They were the things that came before helicopters. Because if something doesn't exist, then you use the thing that did the job before. It's like saying, yes, the ship of the line was a stopgap until the ironclad appeared. No, it was just what came before.
I think how it reads is the OV-1 Mohawk specifically a stopgap.
No.
Because it's introduced in 1959.
No, it's not a stopgap at all.
When Sikorsky's and the projects for the scout helicopters, the long-range scout helicopters, that would go on to be part of the Huey project, have been heavily delayed.
No, I don't think it is, because the thing was issued in 56 to replace the Cessna L-19 Bird Dog, It's very much it's built for a role. It's not a ooh, I'm a stopgap because helos aren't coming. It's a I am doing a job.
Yeah, because by looks at it, they originally wanted to replace the bird dog with a helicopter.
Not as far as I can see. Yeah, not as far as I can see. But no, I don't think it was a stopgap. You should
Because I'm just checking my aerial history of the Korean War for it, and that's a claim that's made there.
Well, I don't have that source, so I don't know.
I think of anything. It's probably not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but see, I will point out how long a stopgap lasts doesn't mean it's not a stopgap.
I mean, Knight, the US setting up an administration, saying the US administration would not be tolerated at all. By the time of 28 weeks later, the UK is basically a gutted wreck. There is no government left. The US coming in is part of a UN mandate. The only reason that it's the US that's picked is because, well, politely, who else has the kit to come in and set up an administration from nothing? And do so on a national basis? Like they're not setting up the American administration of Britain, it's the UN administration. It's just American troops that are carrying it out.
Yeah, because the Americans also want to come in to reclaim a whole bunch of nuclear weapons from RAF Mildenhall.
Understandably.
Because they were afraid that, and they become the tip of the spear for that because they don't want someone to run off with nuclear weapons.
Nope, absolutely not.
Fun fact, RAF Mildenhall still holds nuclear weapons.
Oh yeah, of course it does. Right. So you should Minecraft Watcher. What if Admiral Cunningham, after 1946, was sent back to 1790 to serve in the RN? How would the Napoleonic War? I assume that was how would the Napoleonic War go, but the question just ends, how would the Napoleonic War? Depends if Cunningham's believed. Because he's clearly an admiral in an admiral's uniform, but it's not a recognizable uniform. And he will have no sway over... Unless he can convince people of who he is, where he's from, and what information he has, he's gonna get thrown in the loony bin. If he's believed by his fellow officers, then the Royal Navy sets up textbook ambushes because assuming Cunningham's memory holds, he'll be able to give them fairly decent information on what forces are sailing when and where. And the British can basically put their forces where they need to be to inflict crushing defeat after crushing defeat on the French, even more than they already were. Of course, that's only going to go so far. And
that's on the assumption that the French won't change anything or...
Yeah, I know.
Because the issue with Cunningham is that he's just one bloke. He's a very good age of sail at World War I and II officer.
But he's only one officer.
He's only one officer, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, give him a battleship, even in World War I, and he can change the course of it. But he's not a he's not a wooden boat boy.
Yeah. Like I say, the best resource he has is information. But even that only works for a little bit. Akazuki asks, convert a deflinger hull into a carrier, choose the year and budget for the conversion. You essentially have full responsibility for the parameters of the question. That's a little too open-ended for my liking, but I'll give it a crack. Deflinger into a carrier.
1921.
Yeah. You basically...
1921, completely rip out the turrets, rip out the armor belt, go for Lexington.
Yeah, full conversion.
Convert it to oil-fired.
Yeah,
you could probably get at least 46 biplanes on her.
Yeah, you can probably get 46 to 50 aircraft, because she'll have to have a fully enclosed hangar, no deck park, considering where she's going to be operating. And You can probably get 29, 30 knots out of her. Bear in mind, she's a 26 knot ship. So, yes, she has a good hull form. I'm just bearing...
I would go. You could go. You can get her up to 32. She's got the hull form for 32. The issue is that she's built with mixed fuel engines,
possibly.
which means that she has a very low horsepower per ton for how efficient she is. She suffers from Rodney-itis.
Yeah, possibly.
So get her an actual proper power pack. Preferably a high pressure small tube power pack. Yarrow small tube power pack, preferably.
Yeah. Yeah, she's going to be useful in that role, although whatever form...
And give her 8-inch guns.
Don't know whether she'll have them, depending on who she's built for.
Yeah, she'll need 8-inch guns. If she's being operated by Germany, she will need the 8-inch guns. Especially when she first comes out.
I'm not sure.
Because she'll be operating in the North and the Baltic Sea. The North Sea especially. With early aircraft. In any sort of rough weather, you can't launch and recover them.
Yeah, I suppose there is that.
So she'll need some self-defense capability.
Yeah.
It's not like the Pacific carriers where they can just leg it.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, so I suppose put some dual 190s. Heck, use some of the turrets that are being taken off the armored cruisers to put some of their 8.1s on. Typical officer asks, in terms of 1950s ASW aircraft, do you pick the AF Guardian or the Gannet, and why? I have never heard of the AF Guardian. I am going to look this up.
If it's what I think, it's the AF Guardian.
I'm just having a look. Don't jump the gun until I've... No, I'm gonna go...
Yes, the Guardian. Definitely the Guardian. It is the one that I was thinking of. I mean, I'd much rather have an S2 tracker, but if I've got to have one of those aircraft, it's gonna be the Guardian.
I don't see it. The Gannet seems to be better in every respect. The Gannet's faster, has more endurance, could fly higher.
Yes, but it's first introduced in 1953.
Yes.
Which means that it's a brand new aircraft.
Yes. Okay. And what's your point?
But we're gonna have to look at it in 1953 because the AF Guardian gets retired in 55.
Yes, and in that case again. And again, so at that point, you know, why wouldn't you have the Gannet over the Guardian? And it always seems biased against the Guardian. Like, for a first purpose-built ASW carrier aircraft, you know, it's a remarkable achievement. But you're putting it up against something that is just better. But that's not the Guardian's fault.
Yeah, but if we're talking when they're in service contemporary, I would take the Guardian over it.
Why?
Because the engine's on the early Garnets. I would take the older and reliably proven double Wasp over Garnets. Because the Pratt & Whitney double Wasp is an established engine. It's mechanically reliable. It's at its end of its design life. The Garnets isn't. And call me a coward, but I like surviving. And a reliable engine at sea is important to me.
Hmm.
Now, if you put the Garnet against the Guardian's replacement,
Mm-hmm.
the Grumman S2 Tracker, that's an interesting question.
Yep, see, Dodders, we're not talking about the AW aircraft. We're talking about the anti-submarine aircraft, not the AW aircraft.
Yeah, but it's just
Typical officer.
Again, call me pedantic. I just really don't like the engines on the Gannets, but the twin Mambas are just. Ugh. Why? Why would you do such a thing to a poor engine? Why would you do that to a turboprop?
Yeah. Typical officer asks, opinions on the GBU-28 and BLU-109 bunker-busting bombs. Both were in service in 1991 and 1985 respectively. In terms of the BLU-109, can it actually destroy Saddam Hussein's bunkers during the Gulf War? I mean, the proof is in the historical record. It did. Like, there are a bunch of wrecked bunkers in the Iraqi desert that kind of answer your question for you. I mean, I don't think I'm wrong there. I think they were used against Iraqi bunkers, and they I don't think there's anything more to say with that. They're good bombs, I guess. Useful to blow up things that are hardened targets. I mean,
bomb is bomb beyond a certain point.
I mean, they're guided weapons that can hit pinpoint hardened targets. I don't know what else there is to say. I'm trying to think of a more nuanced way to say it, but that's kind of the way it is.
Bomb is bomb.
Yeah. YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks, what if the Battle of Arnhem was a success? Let's say the paratroopers were able to hold the two bridges. Well, if they're able to hold... Well, it's not so much holding the two bridges. It's holding the two bridges until 30 Core comes through. That's the thing. It's not just about... It's not just... The thing with Market Garden is that everything has to go right. If one element of the plan fails, the plan fails.
The plan didn't fail. Arnhem, even in planning, was always a reach. It was always this is the ambition target, not the mission target. Which, see what you want about Montgomery. But yeah, but if Core has managed to get to Arnhem
and punches through to, you know,
well done. You've just collapsed the Western Front.
As in, you mean completely? That's it. It's done. We're off to Berlin. We're off to the races.
It's done.
So there is no Battle of the Bulge. There is no counterattack.
There can't be. The way into Germany is open.
And at that point,
it's quite literally.
And at that point, those reserves might get sent east.
No. But those reserves get immediately rushed into North Germany to try and hold back the Allied armies that have just liberated the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Because the forces in the Netherlands don't have a reserve.
Yeah.
Well, no. I'll rephrase it. The boys at Arnhem are accidentally dropped on top of the reserve.
Yeah.
So if 30th Corps has made it, they haven't just punched through the front line, they've also just punched through the reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And well done, you've given one of the fastest Allied armies a free shot to cities like Wilhelmshaven.
Very nice.
And Bremen. And Hamburg.
Very nice indeed. AMC Woods asked, what if in January 1st, 1941, all US cruisers built and being laid down are replaced with Des Moines class heavy cruisers, or alternative for the LOLs, Virginia or California class nuclear cruisers? So the Virginias and the Californias, if they arrive, are useless, and I mean that quite literally. The US of the time has no way to operate them. They have no even idea of an inkling of how to use their systems. So I'm just going to disregard that part of the question, because it would be a very boring answer. They get hunks of metal they can't use.
What time's this?
January 1st, 1941. However, Des Moines, coming back to January 1st, 1941. Every US cruiser is now a Des Moines. Every single one. Including everything they're building. Oh my god, that's just death to the IJN.
That's horrifying for the US Navy.
I mean, the lack of 6-inch cruisers is going to hurt. There is that.
Roughly, the Des Moines class cruisers, and to a lesser extent the Wichitas, required a very specialist training setup and an even more extensive training for crews.
Yeah.
Just to keep them functional.
They are high technology machines for the time.
No, you don't understand. They're not high technology machines. They are arcane machines.
Oh, I think I get where you're coming from. Yeah. Right.
Part of their auto loaders are mechanical computers.
Yes. Yes, they are.
They've got mechanical computer timing the reloads, which is how they get round the guns not lining up for the rammers correctly, which on most ships is done manually by gun crews. Well done, you've just given them the arcane.
Yeah.
If they haven't come back with the crews, you've turned... The Northamptons aren't the best cruisers, but they're still conventional cruisers. Yeah, the Des Moines are funny. Anyway, next question.
Yes. And I'm going to leave this one to you for saying I need to check on something, but I'm sure you'll do fine. YouTube Minecraft Watcher asks, what if Warspite's machine spirit somehow transcends time and space and finds itself in Star Wars in the form of a Venator in service of the Rebels? What shenanigans would she get up to? Take it away, Foxo!
Why are you asking me? I'm not the Star Wars guy.
Look, you're the only one I've got. Just go nuts.
I don't know jack about Star Wars.
Fine. Okay, right. Very quickly, and I will... I am hearing a lot of barky noises, and I do want to check them out. So basically, if you send Warspite's machine spirits to a Venator, yeah, that she's gonna take all comers. Like, she's not gonna care if you're a Venator, a Victory, an Imperial Star Destroyer, or anything else. She's just gonna kill you. There is nothing that could stop Warspite's machine spirit, and she's now in something that can slag planets.
Yep. The only thing that you could do to make her worse
put her in the Death Star.
Put her in something like a Rothana.
Oh, bloody hell!
A Rothana battlecruiser. Put her in one of those, and well done.
Yeah.
Well done. You created hell.
AAMC Woods asks, what if in 1939 all US and British land-based bombers were replaced one-to-one with B-2 Spirit bombers and all the weapons, fuel and bases needed to keep them in operation for 3 to 5 years? That's just an instant war win?
Wait, has the institutional knowledge come back?
I would assume so, because the phrase keep them in operation implies they are operating. Which would, we can't operate them without the knowledge to keep them going. Or the spares to keep them running.
It's not the spares I'm worried about.
I suppose could you go into detail about why this might be a problem while I just very quickly go and check on why my dog is going
Fly-by-wire and
schizo.
microelectronics fleet.
I know, just keep going, for goodness sake. I have to check
Because
on
okay, right. You essentially you can't really take anything that's reliant on microelectronics back before the 70s and arguably the 60s. Because especially this is like obvious with aircraft, it's you see stuff like the advent of fly-by-wire and digitalized fire control and digitalized bomb control. It's easy to forget in the modern world that that is a massive non-linear jump in thinking. Like, for example, you're taking a B2 Spirit back to a time when they don't have radar, don't have effective high-altitude radar. Arguably, they don't have effective radar in general beyond basic search. Well, with the asterisk that they don't have radar, effective radar, even for what the B2 Spirit's original design brief is for. Which creates an issue that the B2s aren't going to be much use because their functions that make them so powerful and a massive force multiplier in the modern world don't matter. Now, for those who don't know, the B2 is an absolute nightmare to fly. It is a nightmare to maintain. It's a prima donna princess of an aircraft that has to be all overhauled after 2 to 3 missions. Its level of being prima donna is only rivaled by the F-22, from what we know. But the reason why the US Air Force puts up with it is because it's an existential force multiplier. It's effectively invisible to an air defense network. Which, for the US, and by the looks of it for the Chinese, that's worth it. In the modern period, where your bomber lives and dies by its ability to not be seen. And you can deal with those negatives because a simpler bomber, a bomber that doesn't act like a prima donna, that doesn't require an extensive computerized fly-by-wire system to control, that likes to stay in the air without side slipping and flat spinning. This aircraft exists because of the context of that bomber won't get through. That bomber will get shot down. So the issue, and that's a big enough positive that it overcomes the negatives, right? The issue is if you take it back, you've given them an aircraft that can't maintain high sortie rates. Even if you bring back the infrastructure to maintain it, it's an absolute nightmare to maintain. It's a money hog and it's a maintenance hog. And unfortunately, they're not like the B1s, where if they're not in the best condition, they can still fly. If there's any misbalance on the wings, they will stop. They don't like it. I mean, this is from accounts from pilots, so some of that's tangential.
Ah, there we go. Thank you very much, Foxo. Turns out the poor girl was having
Yes,
a panic
like,
attack. Bless her.
you know, like now brings up, there was one that crashed in 2008 because of water in a sensor.
Hmm.
The B2s
They're-
aren't really much an asset beyond a point that something like a B32 would. So not a B32, a B36, a Super Fortress would be.
Yeah, the B2s are a bespoke platform.
Like I've been going, they're a specialized platform that only exist in the modern world
Mm-hmm.
as a nuclear bomber because a conventional, not prima donna aircraft will not survive the mission.
Yeah. And if you look at the B-21, the actual mass-produced version, it's a radically simplified design.
But the one that isn't that the one that they've shown off once
Yeah, the B-21.
as a replacement for the B1, B2.
Yeah. Well, no, not a replacement, a supplement. It's to replace some of the other aircraft in inventory.
It's replaced the B1s, if I remember correctly.
I think so, yeah. Gradually.
But
it's because of the more advanced technology around stealth that you can actually, in the way that we understand aerodynamics now, and some of the more high technology we have, you can actually create an aircraft that isn't going to kill itself if it's not maintained. You get what I mean, Foxo. It's not a bespoke item. It's we're building these on a production line.
Yeah, but it's because, as I was saying, as you were gone, it's a case of the B2 is quite frankly, taking away its stealth capability, a shite aircraft. It's incredibly unstable, mechanically unreliable. It's got a limited payload for how big it is.
Yeah.
It's got a really low shelf life on components.
Mm-hmm.
But in the context of its job in the modern world, it's the world's most powerful aircraft because it can do missions that are required that other bombers can't.
I mean, for example, look at what happened the weekend just gone.
Yeah.
Like...
Wait, but you can... So it's one of those strange cases of... It's one of those... The B2 is one of those few bits of modern kit that if you sent it back in time...
It's less use than the aircraft it's
would
replacing.
actively be a detriment to the air force that's operating it.
Yep. Like, you don't need stealth to make your aircraft survivable in that period. What you need is something like the B-36. Like, congratulations, I'm up here. What are you going to do? Shoot me? Like, yeah, you can't shoot.
No, the B-2A Spirit isn't the last tribute to the Cold War. It's a tribute to the modern world.
And the way in which...
It's an aircraft. It's one of the few aircraft in service currently that was designed for the digital battlefield. And designed around digital air defense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you like, the B2 can't do anything a B36 can't. So a B36 can't do anything the B2 can't in this period. But I mean, yeah, B36. If you want an aircraft to win World War II,
like the B-36, even without its jet engines, and with all of its problems like engine fires on takeoff, the B-36 in 3940 is uninterceptable. It flies higher and faster than any propeller-driven aircraft of the period. And beyond the range of most anti-aircraft guns.
Beyond the range of anything that's not a 6-inch anti-aircraft gun.
And those at the start of the war do not exist in any nation's inventory.
They don't exist after the war, either. But yeah, but it's just like, even if it's like the engine fires, they're bad. for an aircraft in the Cold War. But if you look at stuff like the early B-29, they ain't half bad.
Yeah, yeah, like yeah. I mean, the B-29 doesn't become good until it becomes the B-50, which is basically yes, a B-29 built that's not gonna kill itself. That's all. That's all the B-50
I'll give it
is.
to the late. I'll give it to the 45 B-29s. They've essentially got it down to pat. It's just refining the electronics in them.
Yeah, and then B-50 comes along and says, "I am peak B-29 formula."
Timu? No. I've got to point out, Timu. That's not a hot take. That is literally the history behind it.
Yeah, like the design lineage that led from YB-49 to B2 is clear, very clear. Northrop worked away at that for a while,
and that's not Northrop the company. That's Northrop the man. Jack Northrop.
Although, bear in mind, he didn't know about the B2 until he was shown, basically because the US decided to be nice to him, one of the prototypes.
No, he wasn't technically supposed to see it, but some of the engineers stuck him in and he got to see the B2.
And he was like, and what was he said? Now I know why God has kept me around all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was obsessive with flying wings.
Man gets shown flying wing. Yeah. Excellent. I shall now know
and it's like,
I'm going.
It's stuff like Northrop. They put up design proposals and they make a prototype that's a flying wing to contest with the F-111 and Boeing. So Lockheed Martin. They weren't Boeing at that point. But
Lockheed Martin is still Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, but
yeah, right.
They're a lot more intertwined than people would like.
Yeah. Problem is, by the time the B-50 arrives, it is borderline obsolete. Kind of. But not really. The whole thing with... It's to keep up... The thing is, the reason B-50 comes along is it's to keep up bomber numbers. While B-47 and then later 52 are filtering into Strategic Air Command. That's the thing with B-36 and B-50. They are there to hold the line as that we can wipe the Russians off the map. We have the bombers to do it and then some. While B-47 and B-52 come in to make that threat. We can do it now in a manner that you're basically going to have trouble dealing with. Please die.
It's not that, it's the B-50s were conversions of B-29s.
Yeah.
That had just had the issues fixed with them.
Yeah, and they also got
for
the
what
jets.
they were brilliant bombers.
Yeah, and they got the jets for dashing over targets, because that's the thing. Like, the B-36...
B-50s didn't get jets.
They did.
Did they?
Yeah, that's one of the major things, because it gave them the same dash capability that the B-36s had. Because, yes, the B-50 and B-36's jet engines can be used in regular flight, but they were mostly for dash over target area.
Yeah, they had the two J-47 turbojets.
Yep.
But it's stuff like the biggest thing, and that saved that made them actually good aircraft, was hopping over to the Wasp major engines.
Yes, that
the
switch was a really
360.
Yeah, that switch was a really good idea.
Is it the R4360?
I will just check. I am on the MacGuffin.
No,
you were right.
I never learned the rhyme or
right.
reason to their naming nomenclature.
You were absolutely right, Foxo. Good memory. Right, so two questions.
Because the B-29 has the
trouble prone
3300, don't they?
Yeah, the trouble prone.
Oh, sorry, the duplex cyclone.
Yeah. Right. So, next question. You should Minecraft watcher. What if all American destroyers in 1939 suddenly became Fletchers? A very happy United States Navy with a lot more DACA to throw at everything. Doesn't matter if it's on the ground, in the sky, under the water. That is a lot more DACA.
Gun is gun.
Yeah, you've just given them more Fletchers. It's not going to meaningfully impact the course of the war, but it is going to result in a lot more shot down Axis aircraft and a few more sunk Axis ships quicker.
It's a more sunker,
Not
more
really.
quicker.
But, I wouldn't even go that. Is this in World War II?
Yeah.
Not really.
The problem is, Fox, I would agree with you, but if you've turned the entire Clemson and Wick swarm into Fletchers, and everything else into Fletchers, the amount of firepower you've increased into USN, it is a significant upgrade, actually. Even some of the interwar destroyers, turning them into Fletchers is a significant upgrade in firepower. Both torpedoes and
the issue
guns.
is, especially with the Germans and the Italians, it's not the Allies not having the firepower to deal with them. It's the Italian and the German destroyers not coming out to play.
No, it's not so much that. It wasn't so much it's not Europe that the change is really going to be felt in. It's the Pacific. Especially some of the earlier actions around Abdicon. If Abdicon has its destroyers from the US be Fletchers, they're not going to be able to stop the Japanese, but there might be a few more Japanese destroyers and possibly a cruiser or two at the bottom.
I doubt it. Fletcher's not going to like an encounter with the Megami or two.
No, it's not. But let's say at the Battle of the Java Sea, if all the destroyers there are Fletchers, it's going to be a lot tougher of a fight for the RGN destroyers than it was historically. Just a gunfight, never mind torpedoes, because the US torpedoes are still going to have their problems. Right, so the final question for the catch-up ramblings, which takes us to a nice, even hour-ish, hour and some change, is from YouTube Minecraft Watcher. What if the panel was allowed to take a ship from the Halo series? What would you pick? I am not familiar with Halo that much. I suppose I'm going to take, one of the frigates, the iconic frigates that are everywhere. They can fly in atmosphere and they can, do funny maneuvers. Mac rounds in atmosphere, boom, 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 all that good stuff.
I got two answers. Am I thinking sensibly or am I thinking meme-worthy?
Go for both. Why not? Final question. Why not go for both?
If I'm thinking seriously, I'm taking a Paris.
Nice.
It's the Paris class heavy frigate. They're just the best frigates the UNSC produced. They had all the creature comforts, the diversified arsenal, and yeah, it's just they suffered in the Covenant War because they weren't specialized enough. Which is sad. And if I'm being a meme, I'm taking High Charity.
Nice.
I'm sorry, I want the moon-sized starship that's moonlighting as a space station.
Nice. And with that, we have reached the end of this.
Oh, really leaving it up?
Pardon? I thought you'd finished.
Oh, really leaving this after an hour?
Yes. Yes, we are. The whole point of catch-up ramblings is to do the catch-up, and then we're
Hey,
done.
what about me?
Okay.
Oh,
Why
yeah,
have a
just
ship?
picking up stream.
Why have a ship when I can have a small flotilla? I'll take Infinity, please.
Yeah,
I don't care that she's buggy. We'll work that out. We'll fix that out.
That's a
Buff that out post.
That's a basic answer. Oh, come on, that's
Fleet.
Yeah,
Fleet,
no.
buddy, pal, you know me. Am I anything other than a basic white bitch?
Yeah, she's got a point there,
Yeah, but no, Verona, why are you taking the inferior parasite carrier? High Charity carries an entire defense fleet with it, including Covenant battle cruisers.
The Covenant has a better ship, and I have too much ego to do that, even though it is objectively true.
Mm-hmm. Oh dear. Right.
Look, I never said I was smart. You're the ones who said I was smart.
Well, you're smarter than me, and I'm not dumb most of the time.
Right.
He's at work, and yet I still feel him staring into the back of my skull.
Right. So, thank you everyone for coming. I know these catch-up ramblings are running a little bit shorter, but they are going to get longer and longer as we do seem to be getting more and more people coming to events and other things. And so the amount of questions for catching up gets longer and longer each week. So we should be returning to nice long catch-up ramblings before too long. Like I say, if you want the catch-up ramblings to be longer, tell people to turn up and ask questions on YouTube or on the Discord so that we have more questions for catch-up. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Foxo and Ruinon, for showing up. Take care, and I'll catch you all on Sunday for Brew Show.